Good morning, everybody, and welcome to session 3 on impact, impressions, and influencing. We've covered a lot of ground so far, and this bit really is very much a mop-up session, a session by which we need to just pull a few things together. Yes, there is a central core to this, and it's related to the subject of assertiveness. Which we'll be moving on to fairly soon. However, before we start, I'd like to just go over a couple of things that we talked about in part 2. In particular, we talked about the importance of questioning. And I talked about open and closed questioning. The reason we call them that, of course, is that some questions we ask open up a response from somebody, which is a good way of finding information out. Closed questions shut people down. So if I just say, "Are you a Christian?" that's a closed question, because the answer could be, "Yes, I am." If I was to say to you, "Can you tell me about your faith?" that's an open question, because you're going to say, "Well, I was born again, I go to this church, and I'm Bible believing," and you're going to get a lot more information with open questions. I know that when we talked about questioning last week, we talked specifically about there are some questions that are leading. So a leading question would be something like, "Are you interested in me helping you to achieve this and this?" I'm leading them to say yes. There are. I mentioned the use of multiple questions. And multiple questions are used by people like me in negotiating because they cause confusion. It's when you ask 3 or 4 questions at the same time, and the person can choose to answer what they wish, but you can point out they haven't answered the question and go back to it. I mean, you can cause a lot of anxiety. It's a ploy that people use. I use when I'm negotiating with suppliers. And we talked about the issue of a hierarchy of questioning. Where at the basic level we collect facts, data, hard evidence, if you like. But then we can move to a higher level. I notice Margaret's very good at this. She will often move into this level, whereas I'm collecting facts. She will move quickly into, "How do you feel about that? What Bishop Peter's saying or what I'm suggesting?" She's now seeking to understand feelings. And of course, the highest level of that model refers to values and beliefs. Because as we said, I think in the early weeks, we all behave consistently with our values. Now, the trouble is, most people don't really know what their values are. But we can find out by looking for patterns of how they do things. So let's move the thing a little bit closer. You'll notice that I'm actually wearing my bishop's shirt without the dog collar. That's because I've come from a service this morning and I'm going to a meeting later on this afternoon, and I need to be fully dressed. So I found myself thinking, all the years I taught leadership and management and all the behavioural skills, I don't think I've ever done it as a bishop or wearing a bishop shirt. So this is a first for me. I want us to talk, to begin with today, about understanding in face-to-face communications. And I guarantee this will, if not shock, it will amaze you. You see, when you look at understanding in face-to-face communications, you see some interesting things. A person's understanding, as preachers we should learn this, only 5 to 15% of a person's understanding comes from the words that they use. 5 to 15%. That's very low. So, if a man is talking in a monotone, preaching, 5 to 15% is what people are going to actually be able to be picking up. Now, let's go back to the model. We've looked at words. I call this sounds, but actually it's related to the way we use our voice. The fact that I can speak louder. I can emphasize certain words. The fact that I can lower my voice will help with your understanding. Because what this does, our voice, that's why it's 20 to 30% of people's understanding, actually gives a message in its own right. And then the final, the really big boy is here. And here we're talking about visual, behavioral, body language. Now, there's a lot of people made their fortunes writing books on body language. It's actually 55 to 75% of what people understand. Let me use a personal example. And I don't mean to embarrass Sue by this. But sometimes Sue will come in from work. She will have had a difficult day. And I'll say, how's your day been? Oh, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. And I'll say, I'll make you a cup of tea. And we'll sit down. And I said, well, did anything specific happen today? Did anybody die? Is there anything you're upset about? No, I'm fine. But you see, the words are not telling me that because I'm looking at her. And the body language is telling me that everything is anything but fine. Forget the words. It's the body language that people pick up on. Now, me being me, of course, I will challenge that. And then, of course, it will all gush out. We have to be able to understand what body language is and how powerful it is in the whole process of how we communicate. So what is about body language? Well, it's more than just what we do with our bodies. I mean, sure, it involves our face. It's about whether we smile or not. We know people like others to smile. It's about whether we have good eye contact. It's about leaning towards the speaker. Why do you think I move the PC off my coffee table and put it on my lap? It's about moving towards you. That's a body language influencing technique. Body language is about open gestures. Trying to, in many ways, make yourself seem larger. It's about people's stance, about being upright. It's about their head nods. Or, you see, if you start telling me something and I'm negotiating and I don't like what you're saying, the first thing I'll do is this. The body language is telling you what's going on up here. I don't have to say to you, I don't like that. I'm not having that. My body language will say it for me. Now, another interesting one, a lot of people don't understand with body language, is when people are close, they have a close relationship. I have a close relationship with Margaret. We often mimic or copy the other person's body language. You see two people who are really close and look at them. Maybe two man and wife having dinner, and they're both hands on the same place on the table, and they're leaning towards each other. And there may be other gestures that they do. I mean, one of mine is, I often do this. And guess what? If I'm talking to Sue, she'll take up a similar, not exactly the same, but a similar response. We mimic other people's body language. Now, before we talk about body language any further, let me just say that there are a number of what we call nonverbal cues or nonverbal prompts. They are things like proximity, how close you get to the person. You know, in my society, we have cultural rules about these sorts of things. And normally, if I'm speaking to a man who's come to my door to deliver me a parcel, I will probably be 4 to 6 feet away from him whilst we're talking. If a friend of mine comes from my church to see me, I will not only greet him with a hug, but we will tend to sit closer together. Proximity is a key issue. Physical contact. Now, COVID in the West has kind of prevented us shaking hands, but I like to shake hands. You know, the history of shaking hands, it's based on the medieval times, that if I shook your hand, you could see that I don't have a dagger or a weapon in it. Contractually, it's often used to seal a deal by shaking of hands. The next thing is artifacts. People may see artifacts on you that give them messages. Now, the obvious one for me today is I'm wearing a bishop shirt. But what you probably can't see, which sometimes, if I can undo this button, people can see, is I also have a cross. And people see that when I'm wearing t-shirts and the like. Artifacts give us information about people. The very environment within which you're communicating is significant and tells you a lot. Last but not least, there are dishonesty characteristics. No, I don't want to give away all my professional secrets. But I mean, if people are averting their eyes from us, it gives the impression of dishonesty. I'll give you one secret. If you're asking somebody for a fact and that person looks to the left while they're answering you, they are probably lying. Do you know why? Because we use the right side of our brain for facts and logic, and the left side of our brains for being creative, making things. So there are cues that people, there are far more than those, but there are cues that people give. Now, you know, when we're influencing, things like the attractiveness of our idea, any emotional stimulation, issues to do with status. If we're talking about what other people want, they will pay attention to that. You'll notice that I use the word sometimes attitude structuring. It's really about how we prepare people for something that's going to happen slowly over time. So, for instance, in the launch of the Federation, we haven't got it yet, but we're telling them it's coming. And we keep telling them. We're preparing them for it. So that by the time we do launch it, they're going to be ready. We can use fear to influence other people, but not on its own. We can do it with psychological relief. In other words, you use a technique where you paint a bad scenario and say, however, if we do this, we'll end up with this, something considerably better. So you can engender anxiety in people to influence them. Remember we talked about the magical number 7, plus or minus 2? Don't overload people, unless you're using it as a tactic for negotiating. And when you're influencing, always remember that there is a big balance between emotion and logic. You need to use both to be effective. It's no good me just reading the facts to you like this. You want to see me engaged with it for it to be powerful. Now let's go on, as I say, to the meat of today. Assertiveness. You know, assertiveness is a very misunderstood word. For most people, they will often perceive it as aggressive. It's not aggressive, it's assertive, as we will see in just a moment. Now, in order to understand this, I want you to imagine a continuum like this. At one end of the continuum, we have aggressive behavior. And at the other end of the continuum, I'm just going to ignore that phone. At the other end of the continuum, we have what we call passive behavior. Now, assertiveness is a range of behaviors that take place in the middle of the continuum. They're neither passive or aggressive. So, excuse me, I will just switch that phone off. It's gone. Oh dear. You can rest assured when I start to make a video, be it a preach or teaching, the phone's going to go. I won't use a word, but there's a kind of a law about that. Let's look at aggressive behavior. Aggressive people lean forward, they have stiff postures, they get close to the other person, their teeth are like mine now, more clenched. That's not a smile, it's just clenched teeth. They glare at the other person, they point, they love using their fingers, and their voice and their level of how they speak is staccato, going up and down all over the place. It's aggressive. Now, the kind of verbal things I think are pretty obvious to us all. If people start with statements like, I'm warning you, or you better had, or do it or else, or critical statements like, this will not do, this is not good enough, or if they use sarcasm, you are joking. Any fool can see. What makes you think that? They're the verbal aspects of aggressive behavior. Now remember the continuum, and here's aggressive. Aggressive people have a problem long term. Their problem is that sooner or later, people will try to get their own back. Let me tell you a funny story. I took on a consulting assignment for British Rail, a major rail organisation run by the government. And one of the conditions I took it on was they gave me free rail travel anywhere in the country, first class. And then, halfway through the contract, they withdrew that free travel. I had to pay for my own travel. Now, my behaviour, sadly to say, became somewhat aggressive. I felt aggrieved. So, do you know what? I did nothing illegal, but I made sure that every piece of paper I used, every pen, every staple, even actually a pair of Wellingtons I had to buy for a particular part of the work I was doing, I put them all on their bill. That's what aggressive people do. That was an aggressive act. Incidentally, that was before I was born again. And I was pretty aggressive in those days. Now, let's contrast aggressiveness with passive. You see, passive people do almost the opposite. They kind of back away from people. They tend to move from foot to foot. They're kind of wriggling around a bit. They often wring their hands. Their eyes are down. The voice is hesitant or apologetic. They diminish their stature. They use words like, I wonder if, would you mind, maybe I could. Or they may use negative statements like, well, it doesn't really matter, never mind. Or they use lots of filler words, what we call filler words, where they say things like, you know, well now, all right. Now, passive people also have a problem. If you're at this end of the continuum, you have a problem. Firstly, you're going to get put on a great deal. People will abuse you. Secondly, your potential as a human being is severely restricted. Severely. You're not going to achieve a great deal acting in the extreme end of passive. But let's go back to the continuum and think about assertive. Remember, here's the continuum, here's assertive. A range of behaviours in the middle. How are they different? Well, assertive people are firm. They have a comfortable stance. They tend to appear kind of relaxed but confident. They have good eye contact. Their voice tends to be steady and clear, and they are very good at active listening. The sort of statements assertive people come out with is things like, I feel, I know, I want, or if they're being empathetic, they may say things like, I understand, or what do you think? They will use, assertive people, cooperative words. Words like, let's see, how can we, what can we? They're assertive. They're in the middle of the continuum. And that's where we, as leaders, need to be, in the middle. I'm just going to show you a model of the 3 steps. If you can see it, the 3 steps of assertion. Now, this model suggests that at the bottom step, to be assertive, we have to show that we're listening and that we understand the other person's point of view. So how do we do that? Well, we may ask some questions. We may even cock our head to the side, because that's a sign of listening where people are trying to catch the words. We need to show that we're listening and we understand the other person's point of view. But then the second step is we have to be prepared to say what we think and we feel about what they've said. That takes courage. We have to be prepared to do it. Remember, we're not being aggressive. We're just commenting on our understanding and saying, well, as a result of what you said, this is what I think, or this is what I feel. And then back to the model. Up here we see the final step is we have to say specifically what we want to happen. You know, I'm due in court in about 14 days, and the case I'm involved in before a judge, I'm going to explain the facts, I'm going to say what I think and feel, and then I'm going to tell the judge what I would like to happen. Now, that doesn't mean to say it's going to happen, but that's the process. You see, the final part of this model here is ultimately the key. We've got to be prepared to seek a workable compromise. We are, with assertiveness, trying to seek a win-win, not a win-lose. So, in preparing for going to court in a couple of weeks' time, I've got my options lined up of what I think might be workable compromises. Because I'm well prepared. I don't go into these situations unless I'm prepared. We have to be prepared to seek a workable compromise. Now, also part of assertiveness is our ability to say no. And if you look at this model, you'll see 4 sections, 4 rules, 4 principles that we must adhere to if we're trying to say no to somebody. I'm going to talk you through them. Don't worry, you don't have to rely on my pictures. You see, the first and most important step, I mean, people don't like saying no. It's not an easy thing to do. But if you follow these rules, it becomes easy. The first thing to do is you have to say no up front and early. Remember, people listen to the first few words. They got to hear that word, no, early. The second thing you have to do is you must never get into excessive elaborations or explanations. Never. Because the moment you start doing that, they are thinking about how to come back to you and get you to change your mind. The third thing to do is take care with apologies. Don't just apologize. You don't have to say, I'm sorry. No. You don't have to apologize. Be careful, because again, it gives them a signal that maybe you're not really saying no, maybe a bit of pushing and they'll get what they want. And then finally, avoid padding, go for offering alternatives to the person. An alternative option. You know, every day, like most of you, I get people begging to me. It drives me crazy, if I'm honest. But I make sure that I follow those principles. No, unfortunately, I'm not able to help you at this point. Don't apologize. I don't offer an explanation. I don't need to. But I come up with an alternative solution. So I might well say something like, look, if you want to seek money from our organization, you have to be a partner. And there are qualifying standards for that. But if you're interested, I can give you the link address to find out more. You see, by taking that approach, saying no excessive explanations, care with apologies, but coming up with an alternative solution, you get a win-win. And assertiveness is about win-win, not win-lose. I'm going to conclude because I see my time's up. And I got to think, which of these slides do I really want to... it's made up my mind, yeah. A few points I just want to make on persuasion and influencing. When you're persuading people, build your own personal credibility slowly. I don't, when I meet people, say, I'm Bishop Dr. Peter James Whitlam, MD, MBA, MSc, FIPM, FITD, IOD. Ridiculous. But these things drip out from time to time. Make sure when you're persuading that your intonation, your diction, the way you say words is as clear as possible. Be conscious of timing. Use pauses. Stop. Because if you stop talking, people want to know why. And they're ready to hear the next thing you say. When you're saying things to influence people, think about using repetition over and over again. When I get persistent beggars, I just write in large capitals, I do not give money. Boom, boom. And they come back. So I cut and paste. I do not give money. They come back. Cut and paste. I do not give money. And they usually get the message by the time I've done that 2 or 3 times. Be aware of powerful words, emotive words, strong words. I don't talk revival, I talk revolution. It's a much stronger word. Revolutions are not issues of violence. They're issues of radical change. That's what they are. And make sure that you're very careful about how you begin and how you end, because we know that perception gets distorted. And if you can use third parties to validate what you're saying, do so. So I will often say to a potential sponsor, well, yeah, we've got, we're very blessed. We've got Microsoft who give us discounts on our products. And British Airways, when we go on mission, give us special deals in terms of the costs and the like. These are big names. They are third parties. And they can be impressive. I'm going to close there. I've got a list of negative things you can do, but I think it's all fairly self-evident. This is the third of the sessions we've run on communications. Communications as leaders are critical. Communications as preachers are fundamental. And quite frankly, I believe most people are pretty poor at it. We want to get better. Our God is worthy. I was very tempted to close on some biblical issues to do with communication. So please indulge me. The Bible tells us, let your yes be yes and your no be no. The Bible also tells us that if we're in dispute with people, how to manage that. Go to your brother or sister. And if that doesn't work, next time go to them again, this time taking somebody with you. And if that doesn't work, take it to the church. The Bible gives us many, many clues about communication. And some of you know, last week I was talking about the Beatitudes and the meek. And I made the point that meekness is not weakness. So I may be a bishop. People may think I'm meek. I try to be meek. But they better believe that I'm not weak, because I'm not. God bless you all. See you next week. And next week, we get in some really deep, heavy, theoretical stuff to start with on the subject of motivation. Wow, that's something to look forward to. We'll probably need 2, if not 3 sessions on that. God bless you all. See you soon.